Hello, welcome to this culinary medicine cooking class. My name is Emily Clairmont. I'm a registered dietitian at the University of Vermont Medical Center and the Comprehensive Pain Program. Today's cooking class is on the power of plant fiber with regards to inflammation and chronic pain. I'll just briefly bring your attention to the handouts, the resources that are available on my table. So for each cooking class, there is a shopping guide and equipment list, there's the recipe, as well as the education. So this cooking class may be a little different than other cooking classes you've attended. This is a culinary medicine experience. Culinary medicine is combining the science of nutrition and the joy of cooking. So it's really our intention to inform you, provide you with education and knowledge about the foods that we're eating, as well as to provide you with a nice, yummy, delicious recipe. So to get things started first, I will just start to talk a little bit about plant fiber and the beneficial role that it has in our health. So we have likely heard that dietary fiber is a good thing, that we should eat our vegetables and fruits, that we should eat whole grains. These are messages that are certainly big and spread throughout the education in our country. As it pertains to chronic pain and inflammation, fiber has the potential of slowing down the rise in blood sugar. And this is true for anyone. However, how it plays a role specifically in inflammation and chronic pain is that rise in blood sugar, if it is rising fast, has the potential of increasing our insulin response and our insulin response associated rise in C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is an inflammatory marker. So from the standpoint of trying to reduce inflammation in our body, increasing our dietary fiber can certainly help. Dietary fiber is a carbohydrate. Many of our plant foods that provide dietary fiber also provide us with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are an essential nutrient for our health, for our lives. Carbohydrates are essentially our main fuel, and glucose, which is a carbohydrate, is the preferred and primary source of energy for the brain. So it's with those two things that are very crucial to our health and to our livelihoods, we want to make sure that we have carbohydrates in our diet. And by focusing on a plant-based diet, we can certainly do so. Whole grains and vegetables, for the most part, provide complex carbohydrates. These are the carbohydrates that are certainly known to slow the rise in blood sugar. As well, there are some whole foods that contain more simple carbohydrates, such as dairy products, fruit, and of course, all of our refined sugars. Most plant foods are going to contain both types of fiber. And so if you were not aware, there's two types of fiber, soluble and insoluble fiber. And as I was saying, most plant foods contain both types of fiber. Soluble fiber prolongs the release of food from our stomach into our small intestines. Foods that are particularly high in soluble fiber include barley, black beans, kidney beans, flax seeds, and Brussels sprouts. Insoluble fiber promotes regular bowel movements, essentially from the constipation side of things. When our bowels are not moving as fast as we would like them to, insoluble fiber can help move things along. Foods that are particularly high in insoluble fiber include turnip, raw carrot, and chickpeas. But like I've said a few times now, all plant foods are really going to contain a combination of both insoluble and soluble fiber. When we're putting together a meal that contains a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of dietary fiber, it's important to consider and keep in mind protein. So protein is a nutrient that helps to balance our body's digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. And many of our anti-inflammatory compounds produced in the body are also derived from proteins. So it's really within our best interest in terms of managing our blood sugar as well as managing our inflammation to include a source of protein every time we're consuming a source of a source of carbohydrate. And in addition to slowing our digestion, regulating our bowel movements, providing us with essential energy for our muscles and our brain, fiber also has the potential of reducing inflammation on its own. And by doing so we are not actually the ones that are gaining the most benefit from the dietary fiber. It is in fact our gut bacteria and yeast that are really reaping the benefits. So yes, we consume dietary fiber, but it's essentially to help feed our gut microbiome. Again, that healthy bacteria and yeast that live in our gastrointestinal tract. So a byproduct from these bacteria and yeast are something called short-chain fatty acids. These are compounds produced by our gut bacteria that have the capability of influencing and modulating our inflammatory response. So by consuming dietary fiber, again, we've already learned that it can regulate our bowels, it can improve the health of our digestive system, it can balance our blood sugar, but it can also improve and increase our anti-inflammatory compounds, improve our immunity, and improve the health of our gut. So these are just some of the reasons why we might want to consume a diet that is high in plant-based fiber. However, I am perfectly aware that consuming the amount of dietary fiber that's recommended in our diet, which is between 25 and 30 grams per day. However, individuals experiencing inflammation and chronic pain, the recommended daily intake is actually a little bit higher. So between 35 and 40 grams of dietary fiber per day. With the average American getting less than 10 grams of fiber per day, 25, 30, 35, 40, that can seem really unreasonable. So for those individuals where they cannot consume the amount of dietary fiber that's recommended through whole foods, there are dietary supplements. So again, on the education that I have at my table, labeled The Power of Plant Fiber, there are some recommendations on supplemental dietary supplement forms of fiber. So now let's talk about this recipe. So this recipe is called a curry lentil quinoa burger. And burger essentially is just referring to the fact that it's in a puck shape and we might consume it similarly as we would a hamburger or a turkey burger. So our curry lentil quinoa burger is 100% plant-based. So I guess technically we could call this a vegan meal. However, once you taste it, I'm sure the words vegan are not going to cross your mind. It's a very delicious recipe. This is a recipe that certainly could be made up in advance. We could batch cook it so that we have these types of quick meals available to us. They freeze very well as they keep for up to a week in the refrigerator. So when we're talking about culinary medicine, right, the combination of nutrition science and the joy of cooking, we like to talk about a couple of key concepts, one of which is mise en place. Mise en place translates to everything in its place. And in the kitchen and in cooking, that really means the organization of our space and perhaps some planning of our ingredients. So as you can see, I have prepared here the mise en place for this recipe. These are all the ingredients that we're going to use, and they're in one place. We have the quinoa, red lentils, oats, we have paprika, curry, and cumin, our delicious, colorful spices. We're gonna finish it off with parsley, chives, extra virgin olive oil, salt and pepper. So I have done the work in advance. This is something that you could even do stepwise. We don't necessarily have to complete the recipe start to finish. We could put together our mise en place in the morning. Perhaps we could have even done this yesterday, and we can come back to it when we feel ready to finish the recipe. Another step that you will see I've already done today is perhaps starting the recipe, doing the mise en place, starting the recipe, cooking up the quinoa, lentils, and oats along with the spices in advance. We actually want that to cool before we make that into burgers. So instead of watching the clock, waiting for it to cool so we don't burn our hands, that's something that we could do most certainly a day in advance. So mise en place is certainly helpful for organizing our space, making sure that we have a nice clean cooking space, but it is also about energy conservation, which is an important piece when we're talking about chronic inflammation, chronic pain. All right, so we will get started here. And the first thing that we're going to do, as you may have guessed from the conversation already, is we're gonna get the bulk of the burgers going. So in order to do so, we need quinoa. And I've chosen today, if you're able to see it, I've chosen a nice multicolored quinoa. So this contains, maybe more the traditional white quinoa as well as red quinoa and black quinoa. Quinoa is a whole grain. It contains more protein than other whole grains. While this isn't necessarily going to be the bulk of the protein for the entire meal, it does ensure that we are getting protein so that we're going to balance our carbohydrate digestion. So we will add this. And there is something to think about. Maybe we don't have quinoa at home. Maybe we don't like quinoa. So there's certainly some other options that we could use. I'm cooking gluten-free, as I do for all of the cooking classes that I do at the Comprehensive Pain Program. So perhaps sticking with trying another gluten-free grain, such as millet or amaranth. If you know that gluten is not a bother to you, certainly you could try barley, you could try farro. What I especially like about quinoa is that it's nice and small, and it blends well with this particular recipe. So next I'm adding red lentils. Red lentils are all a split lentil, and they cook up very quickly. Quinoa is a whole grain that cooks relatively quickly. And again, maybe we don't have red lentils at home. Maybe our grocery store is out of red lentils and we really want to make this recipe. It's important to know that what the lentils are doing in the recipe, which is helping to bind, helping to get it to stick together. But maybe we don't do that. Maybe we use canned black beans, which also have a nice starchy component that could help bind our burgers. We could also use sweet potato or butternut squash, all of which are sources of carbohydrate. Lentils just also happen to have a fair amount of plant protein in them. So now we'll put in the quick cook oats. So these are more along the lines of an instant oat or a 1-minute oat. And again, it doesn't have to be. There are other options. We can do quinoa flakes, or if you're not necessarily avoiding gluten, You can do rolled barley flakes as well. All right, so we have the quinoa, the lentils, the oats, and what we will do is we're going to add some water, so 3.5 cups. And if you have a nice big measuring cup, that's another thing that can save you. It's another thing that can save you many trips around the kitchen. All right, so we'll get that started. We'll give it a nice stir. So that it is nice and blended. We're going to bring that up to a nice simmer, which really kind of is just when the water starts to bubble on the surface. And once that happens, we're going to add the spices. So I have the lid. Once we add the spices, we're going to turn it down to medium low. We want to keep that simmer, but we can certainly cover it to keep some of those nutrients in. While that is cooking, we're going to deal with the chives. So it is these are lovely local chives, seemingly feeling very fresh. And then I chose parsley. This is a recipe that is very flexible. Perhaps you don't like parsley, or I think I also get the suggestion of cilantro. But we could do any number of fresh herbs. We could do oregano and basil, thyme and rosemary. We could use Chinese 5-spice, or even like a chili spice mix. These are blends that will give a really nice flavor to the burger. And maybe we don't have chives. Chives are really kind of available only, certain times of the year. So maybe green onions are going to be more available to you, or even dropping, kind of the onion flavor all together and using sage. Again, I really don't think you can go wrong with the types and blends of fresh herbs that you're going to use. So it's just about boiling. So we're going to add, I chose smoked paprika, cumin, and curry powder. And so we can add those in. We'll add the curry and give it a stir. And it's probably about right now where, if you're cooking along, your kitchen is going to start to smell very, very good. These aromatic spices are not only delivering flavor, they are also delivering nutrients. And we know that based on just looking at them and smelling them. So what I'm getting at are phytonutrients, plant nutrients. These are also called bioactive compounds, bioactive chemicals, phytochemicals. Some people also call them antioxidants. However, they do far more than just provide antioxidation in our body. Okay, so while that's cooking, like I said, we're gonna prep the chives and we're gonna prep the parsley. And so, to prep the parsley, I am literally just going to be taking off the tops. I'm taking off like the softer part of the plant, and I will compost the more fibrous part of the plant. Seeing how the topic of today's conversation is about plant fiber, the power of plant fiber. I have no problem whatsoever if you want to consume the stems of the parsley. This is actually something that I am known to do at home, not throwing out any part of the plant. But if having, more fibrous stems in your burger doesn't sound appealing to you, then perhaps we put them aside and use them for the next broth that we make. So you could keep them in the fridge if you know that you're going to be making a broth soon, or you could put them in the freezer and you could store them until the next time you're ready to make a homemade broth. So really just kind of picking off the soft little leaves of the parsley. Again, this is another thing that can certainly bring you into the moment with the recipe, with the process of cooking, and enhance your digestion. So perhaps you have heard about mindful eating in the past. If you haven't, I also did a webinar on mindful eating that you're welcome to watch. But this is perhaps what I call, mindful cooking. By doing something slow like this, by smelling the ingredients, we can certainly start to appreciate that food is going to be coming into our system very quickly. So you might notice yourself starting to salivate. You might notice that your stomach is giving you signals that it's hungry. And these are all good signs. These are signs that your body is telling you that it is ready to eat. Just a few more leaves here. And so you might be asking yourself, why are we saving the parsley and the chives for later? Why aren't we putting them in the recipe right now? And the reason why we're doing that is because if you've ever handled parsley, if you've ever handled chives or fresh herbs, they're very delicate. And so the heat of the cooking process with the quinoa and lentils could be too much and could really damage the plant, as well as those lovely nutrients that we're relying on from this food. Would the dietary fiber still be intact? Yes. Would other key nutrients such as phytonutrients be intact? Probably not as much. So with something as delicate as fresh herbs, we want to perhaps wait till the end. But you'll notice the dry herbs, we put those in right away, and the cooking process is actually going to help them give their nutrients to the broth, to the burger mix. So I always have off in the corner here, I have a compost bowl. Again, that's part of the mise en place, that's part of the energy conservation, right? I don't need to go out to the backyard, I don't need to go out to the garage, wherever it is that we keep, or maybe even behind me, I don't need to turn around and do that. So we've got our parsley, we've got, which actually I'm going to chop up just a little bit. These are relatively big leaves of parsley. And so I'm just going to chop them a little bit, and that's going to help them incorporate into the burger a little bit. So not much. Okay. Just a few slices. And I'm going to get the oven going now before we move on to the chives. And so for this recipe, we're preheating the oven to 425. 425 is relatively high, but what we are trying to do is, we're going to try and dry out these burgers so that they hold together pretty nicely. All right, so then we've got this, and we will add the chives. And so with this being such a fresh batch of chives, we really just need to cut off just the very, very, very end. I probably could have cut off a little bit less. But this is always cooking. There's always a great opportunity to smell the food that you're cooking. Again, these are going to be things that remind us of what's about to come, hopefully getting our body excited to eat. So just a piece on technique in terms of knife skills. It is important how you hold your knife. And so as you can see here, I am really gripped up onto the top of the knife. You can see my hand comes around. I have my thumb and pointer finger on the blade with my middle finger really kind of butting up to the back of the blade. That allows me to have the most control possible when I am chopping. And then with my left hand, if you're left-handed, it'll be reversed. But with my left hand, I essentially kind of make a claw. This protects my fingers from getting in the way of this very sharp blade. And so then it's just a rocking motion. And so I'm making relatively small chops. These are so fresh that they are just bouncing all over the place. And so this step, similar to the other steps, are something, that can certainly be done in advance. Almost there. These were very, very tall chives. And for people who don't tolerate onions and garlic, chives can be a nice option because they tend to not upset people's stomachs as much as onions and garlic can in some people. All right, so scooping this up, we're kind of creating another mise en place, right? So when our quinoa is ready, we're gonna have our herbs ready to go to mix in. Okay, and so now we have already pre-cooked quinoa, lentils, and what we're going to do is we are going to mix the cilantro, the parsley. We're going to put some extra virgin olive oil and salt and pepper in. And this is going to be with my hands. This can be done with a spoon, but I find that getting in there with my hands gets it really mixed up. So it'll be messy, but that's okay. So I'm going to take my rings off. We'll add the parsley and this parsley and the chives. We'll add a little bit of pepper. You may have heard this before, but pepper can actually improve our absorption of turmeric. So the turmeric that we find in the curry spice will certainly be enhanced. The absorption of that turmeric and the phytonutrients found in turmeric will be enhanced by that black pepper. Add a little bit of salt We didn't add any in the cooking process, so we can certainly add some now. And then this is a couple tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Again, to add some fat, add some richness. It's going to help deliver the flavors of the spices that we put in here, as well it has its own anti-inflammatory properties. So extra virgin olive oil is an unsaturated fat. It contains omega-6 fatty acids, which are actually inflammatory in the body. However, in combination, in a diet that also has anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats, they balance each other out. The extra virgin olive oil goes a step further in terms of being an anti-inflammatory fat. So it's not just that it's heart healthy and can help reduce our bad cholesterol, but extra virgin olive oil, it is a plant food, also contains phytoactive chemicals, and named the one most studied is called oleocanthal. Oleocanthal has anti-inflammatory properties to it, so is one of those things where we're consuming extra virgin olive oil on a regular basis. We are actually providing our body with anti-inflammatory nutrients. Okay, so now we have, I've already prepped a baking sheet with parchment paper. Parchment paper is my best friend in the kitchen. It means that these burgers are for sure not going to stick to the pan, and it's going to make for a lot easier cleanup for me. So we could roughly say that we're looking for about a half a cup, size for these lentil burgers. But what we'll do is we'll kind of form them into a puck and place them on the baking sheet. Add a little bit more. And this can always be done with gloves on. So that's a fun trick, a tip I learned from our chef educator, is that, we could wear gloves in the kitchen. And, and that is going to protect our hands from this ooey gooey mess, and if we want. Guess it doesn't bother me too much. All right, these are looking really, really good. And the texture is great. As you'll notice, these are not falling apart. These are holding their own, holding a nice, good shape, and that's what we want. That one's a little big, and so somebody is gonna get a little extra special treat by having a slightly larger burger. I think I can fit 6 on this sheet. And this is a quarter sheet pan that I'm working with. If I was working with a normal size sheet pan, you could make these a little bit bigger, but honestly, it doesn't really look like we need anything any bigger. So here's the last one. And so maybe even a challenge to you would be to, next time you're at the grocery store, or perhaps you're a fan of, veggie burgers, but take a look at the ingredients. See what ingredients go into the veggie burgers that you like, and see how it might differ, say if we were making it from home, from scratch. Rinse my hands off. The oven is just about at temperature. There it is. All right. So put these guys in. And we'll set the oven for 15 minutes. So 15 minutes is up. This should okay, the 15 minutes is up. Let's see how they look. So with these being kind of a toasty brown color to begin with, we may not see where they have browned up, but when we touch them, they feel nice and semi-firm. They're not ever going to be as firm as a traditional burger, but they should be able to hold their form. So you can probably see them all here on the sheet, but I have kind of prepped in advance an idea of how I might want to serve these. So I have here just plain baby kale, and this is perhaps in place of a bun, but if you're really into a burger on a bun, by all means, have that too. So we'll take one of these, serve it here, and voila. We have homemade vegetarian vegan burgers, the curry lentil quinoa burger, loaded in beneficial anti-inflammatory fiber. I hope you give this recipe a try, and I hope if it's, kind of pushes your limits, I hope it pushes your limits in a very positive way. Thank you.